Hello, everyone. I'm Leslie Rohde, and welcome back to another edition of Ask the Lawyers. Today's topic, heating pads, those things that can feel really good on sore spots, but they can be a danger as well. We're happy to have attorney Trent Shuping from the Warshauer Law Group in Atlanta with us today to discuss this. Hi, Trent. Welcome back.
Hi. Thank you, Leslie.
So, heating pads can be effective, I know, on if you have a sore muscle or something. I've used them before. What's the problem with them?
Well, the danger comes in for the same reason that they can oftentimes be effective in relieving pain is the heat itself. Heating pads, and this sometimes comes as a shock to, I think, a lot of people, particularly even a lot of people who use them, are able to produce very, very serious burns in the users, particularly if users are exposed to it over a period of time. And so in the same way that your crock pot, your slow cooker will, take a raw piece of meat and over time just completely cook it. And you can even burn a piece of meat in a crock pot. The same thing happens to your skin. Some of these heating pads are capable of just cooking users as if they were in a crock pot.
That is hard to imagine, for sure. But if these burn injuries happen because of a heating pad, who's liable?
Well, it's always going to depend a little bit on the specifics of each case, but in most of the 50 states, there's a law that's developed in products liability, and it means, generally speaking, that manufacturers can be responsible when they put products out into the market that are either defectively manufactured, defectively designed, or that don't carry appropriate warnings. And so we see all kinds of cases. Sometimes, for instance, you might have a heating pad that was simply not manufactured properly, and it got way hotter than it was designed to get, producing burns. Other times, the heating pad will not get any hotter than it was designed to get. However, there may be design features of the heating pad that should have been there that weren't, certain safety protections. So, for example, most modern heating pads now have an automatic shutoff. However, you still see some that are put out in the market that do not have this, and occasionally you see older heating pads that don't have this safety feature that will burn people. And in those cases, the manufacturer is going to be responsible, depending on the law of the state, for producing a product that wasn't designed as safe as it should have been. The sort of final and third category you have sometimes deals with the warnings that come with these products. And I said, a lot of people are surprised, and certainly in my day-to-day conversations, my conversations with relatives that I find out are using heating pads, are generally pretty shocked to learn just how severe the burns can be from these devices that you think of as something that's healing, something that's safe. And so there's oftentimes situations where a user who wasn't properly warned about the dangers of the heating pad can hold the manufacturer responsible for not telling them that information that they would have needed to know, both to make an informed decision as to whether or not to use the product and also how to use that product safely or in a way to minimize their risk of being burned.
So what happens in this case? Does someone just sue a company or manufacturer?
Well, again, it depends a little bit on the particular case and the specifics of the jurisdiction that you're in. But our firm, for instance, has handled several of these cases, and that ultimately is what you need to do. You have to sue the manufacturer. You have to go to court and put forth expert testimony. The heating pad manufacturers, it's a problem that sort of goes across various manufacturers, and so the industry has sort of put together a standardized defense in these types of cases. And the challenge in these cases is always going to be to educate the jury and to bring them along to share with them some of the information, some of the truth about these heating pads that, again, I think frankly sort of goes unacknowledged and that most folks don't know about.
So after I get an injury, say a person is injured or gets burned by one of these heating pads, how quickly should we act? I mean, I guess I would think first just taking pictures maybe of the burned area.
Sure. And to sort of back up a little bit, one of the first issues obviously will be how badly is the person burned. So heating pads, like so many things, are capable of causing burns on the spectrum from minor burns that heal in a matter of days to very extreme burns that require hospitalizations of several months. Presumably they could even be fatal. But some of the cases that we've handled are ones where our client woke up or whatever from sleep, and they had been on top of a heating pad, and the entire sides of their body sometimes. And I keep going back to this sort of example of a crock pot, but frankly, that's really unfortunately what it is in some of these cases. In those cases, oftentimes the victim is going to be life flighted even to a hospital. They may remain in the hospital several days. They may or may not be kept in a coma or placed into a coma so that doctors can operate and do skin grafts on them to help heal them. So it depends a little bit on the case. Now, again, going back to, if you have sort of on the very minor spectrum of that, you're probably not going to sue somebody over a burn that heals in a matter, of hours or over the course of 2 days and doesn't leave any kind of lasting impact. On the other hand, if you, unfortunately, if you or someone you love is affected in one of these serious cases, then you're going to want to go ahead and make sure that you're protected. And there you would need to act immediately, obviously. So it's one where even oftentimes the relatives of the person affected might want to reach out and seek some counsel on how to proceed and make sure that they're taking the right steps to protect their interests later on. One of the first things that you want to do is make sure that you secure the heating pad if possible. Make sure that nobody throws it out or that it doesn't get thrown away, either any of the responding medical personnel or some family member or anything like that, because the heating pad obviously is going to be a very important piece of evidence in any potential legal action that person takes.
I would imagine, too, contacting a lawyer like yourself, someone there at your firm, would kind of give a person an idea if it's really worth it to go after one of these manufacturers or not.
Exactly. And we do, I get a fair number of calls sometimes from people who have been burned by heating pads, and we are able to sort of work through that question with them. Is it something that it makes sense for them to pursue? Clearly, in cases where liability is strong and where we think we have a good chance of showing that the manufacturer failed to be responsible, either in how they made it and how they designed it or in their marketing efforts or warning efforts, we certainly are able to pursue those cases lots of times and make a recovery for the victims. But we're able to walk, folks that call us in through that and look at the pros and cons and consider how expensive these cases are. Unfortunately, they can tend to be rather expensive. And it's one of the things, for our clients, what we do is our firm goes ahead and pays these expenses as we go along. But clearly, you always sort of look back to that evaluation of, is it going to be worth it at the end of the day to that client based on the recovery we think we're going to be able to make for them. And oftentimes the answer is yes, but other times we're able to sort of walk through it and give people the peace of mind that they've stuck up for themselves, they've done the right things, they've got a consultation, but maybe it doesn't in their particular case make sense to move forward with the lawsuit.
Trent, finally, let's talk about some takeaways now for people watching this. These heating pads are known to be used for comfort, right? They're trying to make us feel better, and they seem innocent enough, just something you plug in. But like that example you gave of someone falling asleep, I can remember being in that situation before, not being burned, thankfully. But those kinds of things happen. What are things that people need to remember when using these heating pads?
Well, I think, the first thing, if somebody's watching this and they're not watching this because they or a loved one has become a victim of one of these things yet, I think the important takeaway is if you or one of your loved ones is using a heat pad, you want to do a couple of things. First off, you want to check and see if it has an automatic timer and shut off on it. If it doesn't, I would advise that person strongly not to use it. It's just not worth the risk for the type of burns that these devices can make. And, just in talking to my friends and family, frankly, that's sort of as the public service announcement, if you will, that I try and get out there, is just to alert people to how severe these things can burn you. And it really does come as a shock because, again, it's a therapeutic product. You can buy it at the drugstore. You can buy it without a prescription. You simply don't realize that this is, in actuality, a medical device, and it's one which is capable of producing just catastrophic injuries, perhaps even fatal burns in the worst case situations. So if you have someone that uses one or you're using one yourself, first just think about that. Just become aware of that risk. Second, you want to, like I said, you want to make sure that it has an automatic shut-off timer. If it doesn't, don't use it. And I know that can oftentimes, you talk to people and they say, well, I don't like that. I hate it. I want to disable that. I don't like the fact that it shuts off on me after 10 minutes. But again, at the end of the day, it's simply not worth the risk. The third thing that somebody should do is go ahead and just become more aware about this. And one of the problems, really, one of the bases is for liability of the industry for these devices is that they simply do not put this information out there. And so when you talk to people are shocked. They are surprised that these things can produce these types of injuries. And the clients that we've represented, more often than not, are just stunned. Their family members are stunned. They say, I've had this thing for 5 years. I bought it. I thought it was going to help me. I never dreamed a million years it would be capable of doing this much damage to me.
They seem innocent enough.
And one of the big issues is that they frankly they just don't put quality warnings on these things. And so you mentioned that you've used it to sleep before. Most people do. The warnings on there are not in any sort of they're not usually drawn in a way to draw attention to them. But there are warnings on there that say do not use this product to fall asleep. And that's frankly it's just unrealistic. With how people actually use these products. And if you look at all of the warnings that the manufacturers sort of hide in there, they say, well, don't use this if you are sleepy. They say don't get on top of the heating pad or don't put it under you. And again, it's just unrealistic. They say don't use this if you have any sort of difficulty sometimes with your senses. Well, again, people that use these things are going to be people that are in pain. Generally speaking, young people who aren't healthy, who have no pain or no issues, are not using heating pads. It's going to be people who have injuries, serious injuries, people who have chronic conditions, people who may be elderly, people with severe arthritis. And oftentimes people are using these heating pads specifically to try and fall asleep. So again, it just sort of comes back to awareness and trying to find these warnings and try and talk with your doctor, think it through, and be aware of these risks so that you can take steps to adequately protect yourself.
A lot of good information. Trent, thank you for getting all of this out there and helping warn our viewers.
Thank you. I'm always happy. It's been rewarding sometimes to be able to help people who've been victims of these, but it certainly is a lot better if people can just be made aware of this and avoid it altogether. Great.
Trent Shuping with Warshauer Law Group in Atlanta. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We thank you all for watching this episode of Ask the Lawyers. I'm Leslie Rohde with AskTheLawyers.com, where you can choose a lawyer that lawyers choose.